saw The Spine of Night, which brings back a very old style of animation called rotoscoping, which is when you hand draw the animation elements over over footage that was filmed in live action. And really this had its heyday in like the mid to late 70s through about the mid 80s. Heavy metal, lots of Ralph Bakshi movies used it. It's a fantasy world in which there's not really a main protagonist, there's a main antagonist, and he's trying to take over the world through the use of this magic flower petal, essentially. And you're watching how he's destroying this fantasy land by doing that.
Wow. I saw that on the cast list that Richard E. Grant is in this movie, and I am obsessed with him. So can you tell me more about his role in the film?
Yeah, he plays the Guardian. That's the only name the character is given. And he's the person who's sort of the caretaker / guardian of the area where this magical flower known as the bloom comes from. And then Lucy Lawless plays Tizad, who is this nature shaman who is determined to get to where he lives high up on this mountain to convince him to help stop the destruction of the world, because he's been far removed from anything involving this universe, possibly for centuries, but the amount of actual time, at least several decades. The amount of time is a little iffy there because we jump through eras and time frames very quickly. So there are like steampunk elements to it, and it's very violent and very graphic, and definitely not for the squeamish.
Oh.
I mean, is it? It sounds fantasy, but is it fantasy? Is it horror?
It's definitely fantasy. Horror, not so much. It's really violent in the same way something like heavy metal or Fire and Ice is extremely violent, not really horrific. Again, it's very brutal. There's a lot of blood. There's a lot of guts. Patton Oswalt plays a character, an evil person. He's a bad guy in the movie. And at one point, his face gets burned off, and he's talking to his prisoners who burned off his face, and you can see the muscle and the bone underneath it and stuff. It's real gnarly.
So would you say, sorry, Alan, would you say that the rotoscoping like served the plot? Do you think it was necessary, or do you think it would have been better as live action, or do you think that it would have been that
it needed to be rotoscoped? I think given what they're trying to do, how they're trying to do it, and the intense level of details in both the character animation and specifically the backgrounds, the movie's main selling point is it's gorgeous. It is a gorgeous film. Every shot is a visual masterwork. And because there's a certain raw component to rotoscoping, because little human ticks and movements are captured more fluidly than if you were just animating it in a more traditional sense, be it 2D or 3D animation. It adds to that overall intensity that comes from the brutal violence, comes from this crazy world and things like that.
Nice.
So now, compared to Bakshi, what is the quality of the animation?
I think that depends on which Bakshi projects we're talking about.
Yeah.
If we're talking about,
you mentioned it's gorgeous, but yeah,
its most direct comparisons are, of course, Fire and Ice, which Bakshi collaborated with Frank Frazetta on. And I would say this is close to, but doesn't quite top that film in terms of the sheer visual grandeur. I mean, Fire and Ice had freaking James Gurney of Dinotopia work on its backgrounds. It's really hard to top that. It's really hard to top that on an independent movie that took 7 years to make. So considering all that, like, it's fantastic.
Now, my impression of this movie is that it's a movie with a lot of broad appeal based on the cast. Is that correct? Or is it more of like an avant-garde, weirdo, artsy-fartsy?
Yeah, no. I think the only people playing to what would be considered any kind of type is Laurie, forgive me, I'm going to mispronounce his name, Joe Manganiello.
Joe Manganiello.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, there you go. He's in it as the sort of right-hand henchman to the Patton Oswalt character, and he's this tough guy kind of thing. And he's really the only person in the cast who's playing to what people would immediately think of when they think he's in a fantasy animated movie. Everybody else is playing not necessarily against type, but not exactly for type either.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay. You sold me.
I love Joe Manganiello, by the way, just so everybody knows.
I can't wait to watch Arch Enemy. Is that what that's called? That sounds great.
Yes. Oh my God. That's another story for another time, but that movie rules.
Yeah. And plus the dudes, I understand the dude's way into Dungeons and Dragons. So.
Yes. Yeah, he is. He has his
That
own.
wouldn't surprise me.
No kidding.